Now, I want to tell you, because it is what you have done and what we have done together. Everything is an us. It's not a me, it's not a you, it is an us. And this is what we accomplished together. When we began the campaign, we were an asterisk. We were not considered to be a serious campaign. And yet we have ended up winning 13 million votes. We won 22 states and caucuses, and we lost 4 or 5 by less than 2 points. And we had to compete in many states like New York State with absolutely regressive and outdated election practices, which in this state meant that 3 million people who were not registered as Democrats or Republicans could not participate in the primary, which is to me totally absurd and something we're going to change. So the number of points that I want to get across to you, but I don't want anybody here to think that you are brave and courageous and heroic radicals, because you're not. The ideas that we are talking about have become mainstream ideas. They are the ideas, in fact, supported by the vast majority of the people. And here is something else that should give a great source of satisfaction and optimism to everybody here today. And that is the way it turned out, and I would not have predicted this, I really would not have when we began the campaign. It turns out that in every state and in every primary and in every caucus, we won, and sometimes by unbelievably large numbers, the young people's vote. And by young people, it's not the 20-year-olds or the 25, that's people 45 years of age or younger. Now, I know when you're 20 years of age, you think that 45 is not young. Your perspective will change when you are 45. In fact, all of you remember Dick Van Dyke? Dick is a great guy, and he campaigned with us out in California. He's 90 years old. He's as spry as can be. I said, what a dynamic young man. He's only 90 years old. But anyhow, this is the serious point, and it's everybody understand this. We did terribly, and I don't know why. Maybe we could have done better among older people, 65 years of age or older. But we won overwhelmingly among the younger people. What does that tell you? It tells you, that's right. It tells you that our vision, our ideas of economic and social and environmental and racial justice is the future of this country, if we stay at it. And the other thing, if we could turn down those lights a little bit, that would be great. Somebody can do that. Shannon, you could take care of that. What we also did is we engaged the American people in a way that is unprecedented in modern American history. We held rallies where we spoke to over 1.5 million people. 1.5 million people. As volunteers, you were among hundreds of thousands. You know how many telephone calls we made during this campaign? 75 million telephone calls. Probably ran up a pretty big phone bill, but what's the point? The point is that when people become engaged, incredible things can happen. Our people, volunteers, knocked on 5 million doors. We held 74,000 meetings in every state in this country. and we rewrote the book on campaign fundraising. So when you hear people say, well, I've got no choice. I have to go to Wall Street, and I have to go to the drug companies, and I have to go to billionaires and a super PAC, not quite true. What we learned, and again, it's not something I would have necessarily believed could have happened, is if you have an agenda that speaks to the needs of ordinary people will kick in and help. And one of the things, there was an article that I actually couldn't even read because it was so moving to me. I think it was out in the LA Times, they wrote this article. Somebody analyzed, I don't know how they do this, who our campaign contributors were. And it turns out that a majority of them were below the median income. In other words, I mean, that's really extraordinary. It's one thing to say you get $27 on average. It's another thing to know that a majority of your contributors are below are in the bottom half of the income of people in this country. And that was just incredibly moving. But it does tell you that if you are prepared to stand up and fight and bring people together, it is amazing what people will do. We got money from people living on $10,000 a year Social Security. People are unemployed. So the point is, when you stand up, good things can happen. And what are the issues? One of the things that I think turns off the American people from politics, and what I'm here really to talk about, is how we engage people in the political process. I've got 7 very beautiful grandchildren who I love very much, and I got 4 great kids, and you have family and kids and grandchildren. We have got to make sure that we leave these kids a world that is healthy and that is habitable, that's a good world. And we can't do it by allowing other people to make the decisions for us. We have got to make those decisions ourselves. And what I think goes on, and one of the reasons that people get so turned off to politics, is all they hear is one candidate ripping apart the next candidate. You know, I'm great, the other person is terrible, and so forth and so on. And nobody is engaging people in terms of the issues that they are experiencing in their lives. And that's what good politics is about. Good politics is when you're talking to people, people start nodding their heads. And they say, yeah, that's right, that's what my uncle is doing, that's what my kid is experiencing, that's what I'm experiencing. So I think one of the things that we have to do is to really go deep and not let media do this. Media, in this sense, as most of you know, corporate media is owned by large corporations. They have their agenda. And generally speaking, with some exceptions, their agenda is not to really allow serious discussion around serious issues. There's a conflict of interest there. And our job, therefore, is to decide what the issues are and figure out how we can communicate. And by the way, another reason we did so well with young people is we did fantastically well in social media. And that is a tool that is available to all of us. We can communicate directly with people. We have, I don't even know how many millions of people we know on various lists. All right, but what we have got to determine, if we're not going to be typical politicians who go around saying, I'm great, my opponent is terrible, what are the issues that your neighbors and your friends are concerned about? So let me just tick off a few of them, because I think these are the issues that are moving America. Number one, campaign finance. The current campaign, and I don't want you to get used to this system, because we're going to change the system. Don't let anybody tell you that Citizens United has anything to do with democracy. It is the exact opposite of what a democratic society is about. So at the top of my list, because it touches on every other issue, is the need not only to overturn Citizens United, but to take it a step further, to do public funding of elections. You know, and by the way, in this area, New York State, you know, is generally speaking a fairly progressive state, but in these areas, New York is way behind other states. Your voter turnout, as I understand it, is historically quite low. I mean, what I could see in the primary process was really, really bad, really creating all kinds of barriers to people participating in the political process. All right? We got to open it. Yeah, of course we do. And by the way, as we speak right now, literally this moment, in St. Louis, we have 5 great people on the platform committee who are going to fight for a people's platform in the Democratic convention. We're working on that right now. But opening up, think about it. California is making some pretty good steps. There are countries around the world where if you are 18 or whatever the voting age may be, you're registered to vote. That's all, period, end of discussion. Why do you have to fill out 20 forms? You know, Oregon, now, California is doing well. They're moving toward universal registration. What Oregon does, you know what Oregon does? They send everybody a paper ballot. And you fill out the ballot, you put it in a box, and you send it back. Their voter registration level is very, very high. Now, you know, what may work for Oregon may not work for New York State, but think about ways to make it as easy for people to participate in the political process as possible. Voting and participating is a right, you know? And here in New York, you know, clearly you've got to knock down a lot of barriers. This idea that to participate in the primary, you have to change your party registration from independent to Democrat or Republican, was it 6 months before Election Day? That's totally absurd. And that's a corrupt system, and everybody knows what's going on. That's a system that maintains the established leaders of both parties, I guess. All right, and we've got to break that down, and we've got to deal with this whole superdelegate issue as well. So keep up the fight in whatever way makes sense to you to create a democratic form of society. The end goal of that should be the United States having one of the highest rates of voting turnout of any country on earth, not, as is currently the case, one of the lowest voting turnout rates. Okay, that is the goal, and we got to figure out how we get there. In many ways we can do it, but let's focus on creating a democracy. Let's focus on getting big money out of politics. Let's focus. I mean, again, this is something we get used to, but I can tell you that in Congress and the Senate, nobody will disagree with me on this, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. People spend an unbelievable amount of time. You know what they do? They're not working on health care or unemployment or the environment. They're raising money. I am sure that as we speak right now at the Democratic National Committee or the Democratic Senate Committee, Democratic House Committee, Republicans, there are people on the phones. You know what it's called? It's called dialing for dollars. What they do is they give you a list of names of wealthy campaign contributors, and you call up and you say, hi, I'm Congressman Joe, and I understand you are a Democrat. We'd love to have your support. Can you send me $1,000? People spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing just that. And that's why it's imperative that we move toward public funding of elections so that Congress could be out at meetings like this, hearing what his or her constituents have to say. And then we got to deal with, again, what I was excited about, what I love about this campaign that we're running, is that we're raising issues that people agree with, but which other campaigns never talk about. Pope Francis talks about this, the morality of an economy in which the top 0.1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Think anybody in America thinks that's a moral economy? Nobody does. It is wrong. It is immoral. This is not a poor country. You know, if we were a poor country, we would have a certain type of discussion. We would say, okay, look, we're really poor. We can't afford good health care, can't afford good infrastructure, can't afford good education. We're poor people. We are not poor people. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But nobody knows that because almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the 1%. That's just a fact. And this is an issue. Now, how do you rebuild a disappearing middle class? How do you deal with the word called poverty? Some of you may not have heard of that word because it never appears in campaigns or on television. But poverty, 47 million people in America living in poverty. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. About 21% of our kids, people of color, the numbers are much higher than that. Is that acceptable? No, it is not acceptable. And we can change it. This is not, what I'm telling you, these are not impossible things to do. Public policy can change that. So have the courage when you go out there and you engage, have the courage to talk about morality as part of politics. And let people who disagree with you tell you why they think it's right, that 58% of all new income today is going to the top 1%. Can you imagine that? Here in Albany, in my state of Vermont, people work 2 or 3 jobs. Everyone's working hard. 58% of all new income is going to the top 1%. Stay on that issue. And we have got to reach the day where people say, this is obscene. This is not what America is supposed to be about, and we're going to change that. Now, the reason we don't talk about poverty is that very few poor people vote. That's all. Poor people spend their lives trying to survive. They're not going to vote. 80% probably of poor people did not vote in the last election in 2014. I was when you talk about poverty, I was in South Dakota at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Anybody here hear of that? Do you know what the life expectancy is on that reservation? It's 58 years of age, which is what it is in Guatemala. This is a poor third world country right here in the United States of America. Right now in America, in an ahistorical way, unprecedented, there are millions of people who are now dying at